The case of Anna Repkina. Anna Alexieva Repkina, a charming and outgoing woman from Chelyabinsk, Russia, hailed from a good family. With a strong work ethic, passion for travel, rock music, and cats, she owned several. Anna was a vibrant individual. She loved capturing life's precious moments through photography and valued romantic relationships deeply. Her ultimate goal was to find true love, settle down, have children, and build a happy family. Anna's remarkable sense of humor made her a delight to be around, something her friends and acquaintances often highlighted. However, her life took a dramatic turn in 2016 when a high school sweetheart of 7 years ended their relationship, leaving her devastated. Despite this heartbreak, Anna refused to give up on her dreams. She took the initiative to try online dating, determined to find her ideal partner. On a Russian dating site, she came across a promising match who seemed to possess all the qualities she was looking for. Anna met a charming young man named William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. What drew her to him was his fascination with Russian culture, but more importantly, his adoration for her. William consistently showed kindness to Anna, often complimenting her and making an effort to be present for her whenever she needed him, despite the physical distance between them. Those who knew him described William as a charismatic and passionate person with a great sense of humor who inspired those around him to chase their dreams. As they developed their online relationship over several months, their bond grew stronger. They seemed perfectly suited for each other, sharing similar tastes in music and a love for live performances, as well as a similar sense of humor. Friends who knew them noted that Anna and William complemented each other beautifully. William's caring nature was evident in his thoughtful gestures, such as sending Anna flowers despite being separated by oceans. Anna and William's online chemistry was undeniable, but they wanted to confirm their connection in person. So, in December 2016, they decided to take their relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to spend the Christmas holidays with William. However, she initially made a mistake and booked a ticket to Portland, Maine instead of Portland, Oregon. Before realizing the error, she had already flown to Maine, but she was determined to make it work. After fixing her flight issues, Anna finally arrived in Oregon. William picked her up from the airport and they spent the next 10 days together. He took her on sightseeing trips and they enjoyed activities like visiting the seaside, playing in the snow, and cuddling by the fire. William also introduced her to his friends and they celebrated New Year's Eve together, sharing a romantic kiss at midnight. It was the perfect Christmas experience for Anna. After a whirlwind 10-day visit, William popped the question to Anna using his grandmother's emerald ring and she happily accepted. However, what Anna didn't know was that William was leading a double life. During their time together, he had also been secretly seeing his 33-year-old landlady, Michelle Chavez, behind her back. William rented a room in Michelle's house and it seemed he also held a special place in her heart. Michelle was married with 2 children, but this didn't deter her romantic involvement with William. Their affair had been ongoing for over a year when Anna, William's girlfriend, visited Michelle's home. Unbeknownst to Anna, she was meeting her rival as Michelle was her boyfriend's landlady. Michelle showed understanding when William brought Anna to her home, perhaps thinking William would never leave her or believing Anna was insignificant, much like her own husband. Whatever the reason, Michelle didn't expose their secret. It wasn't until Michelle discovered the engagement ring that her husband's stance on the situation became clear to everyone involved. Meanwhile, Anna returned to Russia, unaware of the drama she had left behind. After posting a photo of her engagement ring on Facebook, the social media algorithm brought the post to Michelle's attention. Michelle's anger wasn't solely due to William's engagement to another woman. Michelle planned to leave her husband to be with William and, as a symbol of her commitment, took off her wedding ring and gave it to him. However, she soon discovered that the ring was identical to the engagement ring William had given to Anna. It turned out that William had given Anna Michelle's own wedding ring, which had been recycled. Michelle confronted William about this, and he tried to calm her down, insisting that Anna meant nothing to him and promising to break off their engagement on March 1, 2017. Meanwhile, Anna had packed her bags, including her wedding dress, and had quit her job, ready to start a new life with William in another part of the world. Michelle was unhappy about this development. Anna's mother, Yelena, also had reservations about her daughter's hasty decision. She was unsure about William, whom Anna barely knew and thought she was rushing into things. Anna, however, was convinced that she was in love and saw no reason to wait. Yelena finally released Michelle from her grasp. Michelle, realizing Anna's visit was not a social call, grew angry. She demanded that William find another place to live, refusing to let the engaged couple stay under her roof. William complied, renting an apartment for himself and Anna. However, he continued to secretly see Michelle sneaking out to visit her and reassuring her of his commitment to her, downplaying Anna's importance. Michelle became increasingly worried about William's growing relationship with Anna, so she took action. She contacted Anna on Facebook, revealing everything about her and William's ongoing affair. Anna reported the conversation to William, but he dismissed it as Michelle's jealousy. Anna believed him, and the couple decided to ignore Michelle's warnings and focus on their future together. They set a wedding date for March 23rd and planned a beachside ceremony. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia and they headed to the beach. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home. They planned to try to get married again in April. On that same day, surveillance footage captured the couple buying food at a McDonald's drive-thru. Anna sat in the passenger seat still wearing her wedding dress. William had told her that the officiant was sick, but that was a lie. Despite claiming he didn't love Anna, William had kept her convinced that he wasn't invested in their relationship. However, Michelle had grown tired of William's manipulation. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum: choose between her and Anna. Michelle made it clear that if Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action, build a snowman, a sinister phrase meaning to kill someone and hide their body in a snowy area where it would never be found. After issuing her threat, Michelle lost contact with William and assumed he had chosen Anna over her. She left him voicemails to express her feelings. On Sunday, April 16th, William phoned Michelle to share the news that he was single again, having just ended his tumultuous relationship with Anna, who was now headed back to Russia. Coincidentally, William had hit a deer with his car and was waiting at the Ale Martile store for repairs. He asked Michelle to meet him there. As it was Easter Sunday, Michelle was attending a family gathering, but she excused herself to join William. When she arrived, they reconnected by having an intimate moment in William's car, reaffirming their strong connection. On April 17th, Anna's body was discovered in the forest. Initially, investigators didn't know her identity as there was no identification found with her body and she had only been in the state for about a month. The crime scene lacked a murder weapon but was littered with trash. However, amidst the debris, a clear plastic bag caught their attention. Inside, they found a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken paper bag. The KFC receipt turned out to be the crucial clue in solving the case. It contained a date, time, and debit card number, which led investigators to Kevin Thomas. When questioned, Kevin revealed that he was best friends with William and had been getting to know Anna. He also shared a tradition with William where they would eat lunch at KFC every Friday. The receipt, it turned out, was from a purchase made about a week before Kevin's questioning. The investigation into Anna's death led to the discovery of William's deceitful behavior. In his interview, Kevin revealed that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to clear his head. However, William never returned the weapon. The police began to suspect William and Michelle after hearing Kevin's statement. Following Anna's death, William's behavior became increasingly unusual and suspicious. He withdrew money from Anna's bank account to pay off his debts and was caught on camera buying cigars and Star Wars Legos at various stores. William also confided in Kevin that he was spending money recklessly to cope with his emotions. Furthermore, he began researching time travel and even reached out to strangers on WhatsApp offering to exchange his soul for the opportunity to go back in time. William wanted to travel back in time to April 16th to prevent a situation caused by his best friend's mistake. However, on that day, William was seen crying in a store employee's arms, claiming his girlfriend had just broken up with him. He had moved back in with Michelle but was picked up by the police and questioned. The police asked William about his whereabouts on April 16th, and he said he was on a drive with Michelle. When asked about Anna, he denied having a romantic relationship with her, saying they had only gone on 2 dates and he had ended things. According to William, their last interaction was in mid-March when Anna mistakenly posted their engagement on Facebook, causing trouble with Michelle. When questioned about the trash found near his late fiancée or the woman he dated, William admitted to littering but claimed it was just KFC trash and a can from the general store not related to Anna's death. About 40 miles separated the general store from the logging road. However, the investigators did not believe William's alibi. Lieutenant Chris Duffett, one of the investigators, quickly increased the pressure by revealing that William's trash had been discovered near a murder victim at a different location. Initially, William reacted with surprise and heartbreak, feigning disbelief that he was being questioned about a murder. 2 days after Anna Rapina's body was found, her fiancé William Hargrove was arrested for her murder on April 19th. During the investigation, Michelle was also questioned about her whereabouts on April 16th, the day Anna was killed. At first, Michelle stuck to a rehearsed alibi, claiming she and William had spent the day together, with William picking her up from her mother's house and going on a drive. However, Michelle later changed her story, admitting she had lied initially. She then claimed that she and William had planned to meet up, but he never called or showed up. When the police revealed that William was in custody for murder, Michelle's response was surprisingly calm, saying only, "Okay." The investigator pressed Michelle on her lack of emotion, which eventually broke down, and she tearfully attributed her initial calm to being in shock. William Hargrove was indicted on charges of murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft in June 2018. His trial began in October 2019 with the prosecution seeking the maximum penalties for each charge, while the defense argued for a more lenient sentence. William's defenders claimed he was innocent and that Melissa, the spurned lover, was the true culprit. However, the prosecution presented a strong case against William, backed by evidence and motive. The evidence showed that William was torn between 2 lovers, with Anna pressuring him to make a choice. There were records of William and Anna driving together in an alone car. On the day of Anna's murder, William's cell phone was tracked to the logging road at 4:30 p.m. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with his fingerprints being the only ones on the weapon. Despite denying any involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to go shopping and pay off his car insurance. He was even filmed withdrawing cash from an ATM using her card. The prosecution argued that William had driven Anna to the forest, gotten her out of the car, and then executed her with his shotgun. The prosecution claimed that William was faced with a choice between Anna and Michelle, leading to his actions. In contrast, the defense argued that their client was innocent. According to the prosecution, the evidence pointed to Melissa as the perpetrator. A threat from Melissa to build a snowman with Anna, her cell phone found near the logging road, and Anna's cell phone discovered in Melissa's house suggested that Melissa had planned the crime. Melissa, who was not charged with any crimes, testified as a witness for the prosecution. She revealed that she worked as a late-night cab driver and was married to an Oregon State University instructor, but their marriage was loveless and open. She met William at a bar where he worked and, with her husband's permission, began a romantic relationship with him. As they grew closer, William rented a room in her house. When Anna entered the picture, Melissa was not threatened, having a similar open relationship with William. Melissa explained that by her second visit, she couldn't tolerate the situation anymore, especially when she saw her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although she had given William an ultimatum, she had no role in William's actions that hurt Anna. Melissa clarified that she never intended for Anna to get hurt or killed. She denied the defense's allegations, stating that the threat about building a snowman was just a joke, a light-hearted family comment. Even if it was a bit extreme, she acknowledged that her cell phone was found in the forest, but William was the one who drove her there. She didn't know why or what he planned. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned. As his partner, she naturally held on to it for him. Melissa's testimony lasted 14 hours, and she was not the only one. Around 70 other people testified, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, some of Melissa's family members, and others. Throughout the case, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, particularly in her hometown in Oregon, where she was criticized and ostracized by the locals. Michelle had reached a low point and attempted suicide, but fortunately, it was unsuccessful. The prosecutor praised Michelle's efforts to take responsibility, calling her actions tough and super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver their verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours and returned with a decision. Despite the defense's efforts, they couldn't find Michelle guilty of Anna's death. There was no physical evidence linking Michelle to the crime scene or the weapon used. In fact, she had a solid alibi. She was celebrating Easter at her mother's house, and multiple witnesses could vouch for her presence. On the other hand, William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence against him led to his conviction on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Anna's attorney announced plans to appeal the verdict. Notably, the jurors developed a strong connection with each other during the trial. After the trial, they visited the logging trail where Anna's life was tragically cut short. To pay their respects to her memory, Anna will be remembered as a courageous young woman who left her home in Russia to build a new life in the United States. Anna was a loving person who openly shared her love with others. She was cherished by many during her lifetime, and her memory will continue to be loved and honored, the prosecutor, Amy Matsko, stated. Moving on to the next case. The case of Abigail Hernandez. You've probably seen movies where someone is kidnapped in broad daylight, endures days of torment, but somehow bonds with their captor and eventually escapes. Those stories are scripted fiction, but for 14-year-old Abby Hernandez, survival was very real. Her story is one of remarkable strength. Abby was abducted just 3 days before her 15th birthday, prompting an immediate police investigation. Yet, it wasn't until 9 months later that she stunned everyone by walking back into her home on her own. What you're about to read might sound like something out of a psychological thriller, but it was Abby's real life, her personal nightmare, that changed everything. Abigail Hernandez was born on October 12, 1998, in Manchester, New Hampshire, to parents Xenia and Ruben Hernandez. Known to friends and family simply as Abby, she was often described as cheerful, bright, and full of promise. Abby was an easygoing girl with a wide circle of friends. In her own words, she considered herself a tomboy, a label that fit well with her sporty style and love for classic rock music. At the time of her disappearance, she was dating Jimmy Campbell, and the two were completely smitten with each other. Friends and classmates often said that Jimmy treated Abby like royalty. Sadly, her early years weren't without hardship. Her parents divorced when she was very young, and she was raised by her mother, Xenia, alongside her sister Sarah. Still, the shift in family life never dimmed Abby's spark. She remained upbeat, resilient, and grounded, always focusing on the positives, no matter what life threw at her. But Abby had no idea that her life was about to change in a big way when she was walking home from school in October 2013 on what seemed like a normal autumn day. Abby's school day on October 9, 2013 was like any other. She had 3 days left until her 15th birthday, which is a big deal for most teens. She put on a gray sweatshirt, black yoga pants, and black boots with heels for school. Abby loved these boots because her mom, Xenia, had just bought them for her as an early birthday present. This was the first time she wore them to school. If you know anything about shoes, you know that the first few days in a new pair are the worst. You get sores all over. It hurts your feet to walk and it sounds and feels awful. Well, Abby felt bad about her choice as soon as she got to school. Miranda, Abby's best friend, said she walked funny all day and her feet hurt a lot. That was the only strange thing about Abby's school day. The school day was over quickly after she went to class and took pictures with her friends. Genya couldn't wait for her daughter to get home from school though, since Abby didn't come back. Abby usually took the bus to and from school, but Genya knew that she loved walking back home from school because it was such a short distance. Because of this, Genya thought that maybe October 9th was one of those days when Abby chose to walk back home, even though her mother didn't know about her bad day with her shoes at this point. But by evening, Abby still hadn't made it home from the afternoon. She called Abby on the phone, but she didn't answer. That's when Xenia felt fear grip her and wouldn't let go. Soon, Xenia went to school and asked the librarian where Abby was. Xenia would forget how to breathe after hearing what the librarian said. The librarian said that Abby had walked out of school hours ago. At 7 p.m. that same day, Xenia called the police right away to say that 14-year-old Abby Hernandez was missing. The detectives got to work right away, and word quickly spread through the small town of Conway. When the police watched the school's CCTV footage, they saw Abby leave the building and head home around 2:29 p.m. She didn't go in a strange or unknown direction. It was just another day. She wore the same clothes every day and wore her rucksack over her shoulder. The police had no reason to think she was running away. There was nothing missing from Abby's house either, so it was very strange that she went missing. The investigators asked the usual questions, mainly trying to determine if Abby had been acting differently or considering running away. But everyone who knew her thought that idea was ridiculous. They explained that Abby was actually busy planning her 15th birthday party. She was focused on the theme, the food, and deciding how many friends to invite. No one believed she would just leave behind everything and everyone she cared about. Every friend insisted Abby would never do something like that. Meanwhile, the investigation ramped up quickly. Abby's photo was spread across news outlets, and officers canvassed the town, searching for any leads. A massive search effort was launched, with numerous volunteers helping to comb through every possible area, hoping to find her. Unfortunately, those initial efforts came up empty. Searches were conducted both on the ground and from the air, and the FBI joined the case early on to help with the investigation. After just a few days, hundreds of tips had come into the police station. Each one was looked over by the police in the hopes of finding useful information about Abby's case. They also held press conferences often to let people know what was going on with the case. But no one knew where Abby was, so everyone was still on edge. There was also a website made called Bring Abby Home, which had many pictures and videos of Abby. Abby's 15th birthday was only 3 days later, but there was no party. Instead, Abby's family held a vigil, and people in the community sang happy birthday to her and prayed that she was safe. That Genya was having a very tough time is something that everyone knows. There were times when she felt empty and hopeless, but she had to be strong for her other daughter, Sarah, and keep her hope for Abby alive. The detectives were still doing everything they could to solve the case. The records from Abby's cell phone were looked at. If Abby's phone was lost, it couldn't be found, but her last known location was about a mile from her home. The police also looked at text messages, but they didn't find anything interesting. For the last time, Abby texted her boyfriend, Jimmy. Jimmy was also on his way home from school, but he took the bus. Jimmy was the last person Abby talked to, so the police questioned him. But they quickly learned that Jimmy and Abby had a normal, loving relationship, and Jimmy had nothing to do with Abby going missing. Now it is November 6, 2013, which is almost a month after Abby went missing. Xenia got the mail while she was home. As she read it, one of the letters with the date, October 23rd, caught her attention. It had been 2 weeks since Abby had been seen last. This letter made Genya feel like it was important, so she tore it open and read it. Then she read it again and again. She wrote the letter. However, some of the words were not quite right, and Genya was sure it wasn't how Abby spoke or wrote, but she was sure it was Abby. She wrote in the letter that she loved her family and was safe, but she couldn't tell them where she was. At the end of the letter, Abby told her mom to keep hoping, which was proof that she had indeed run away. The letter was given to the police right away by Genya, which shocked everyone. She had really run away, right? Why would she do that? How come none of her friends knew about this? But the police knew right away that Abby wasn't running away when they saw the letter. Everything looked too good to be true, and thankfully, the police didn't give up on the case. Detectives also tested the letter and found Abby's DNA on it, which proved that she had written it. However, they didn't think that Abby had made up the things that were in the letter. In the end, the investigators shared this information with the public in the hopes that it would help the investigation. However, it wasn't long before they heard from or found Abby again 3 months later. Now let's go to March 17, 2014, when a woman was driving 30 miles from Conway and hit someone else's car by accident. After getting out of his car, the driver of the other car was armed and hit the woman several times with it. The attack was terrible, and I'm sure the woman was completely terrified. After the arrest, it became clear that the man was in custody. But how did this random attack connect to Abby's disappearance? The police couldn't shake the suspicion that this man might be involved somehow. They didn't share their reasons with the public, but something about him just felt off. It turned out this man was Nathaniel Kibbe, 34 years old. Nate was known for his odd behavior and passion for collecting guns. He was a violent individual with strong, sometimes extreme opinions on the Constitution, gun rights, and similar issues. Basically the kind of guy who joked that the F in F-150 stood for freedom. After his arrest, police decided to confiscate all of his firearms, dozens of them, and surprisingly, Nate didn't resist. When they arrived at his remote home, located a few miles outside of Conway, they immediately noticed a large shipping container tucked away in his backyard. The container was so conspicuous that the officers asked Nate right away what it was all about. Right away, Nate defended himself by telling the police that they were only there for the guns, and that was all they were going to get. The police did leave the property after this short deal, but something about this strange shipping container made them feel very bad. At first, they looked around a bit, but Nate was right. The police were only there to look for his guns, so that's all they could legally do. Once they had the evidence they came for, they left after a few hours. They had no idea that Abigail Hernandez was just outside the door of the shipping container. Nathaniel Kibbe, a very strange and eccentric person, took Abby away. But how did Nate, who Abby didn't know, take her? What did he want from her? And why did he pick Abby in particular? We have to go all the way back to the day Abby disappeared in order to answer that question. A few seconds had passed since Abby was leaving school that day, but she still missed the bus. Even though her new boots hurt her feet a lot, she had to walk the short distance to her house. As she texted Jimmy, her boyfriend, she caught a glimpse of a car pulling up. A man in his 30s was driving. He saw Abby's limp and offered to give her a ride. Abby agreed because she thought the man was being nice, and she got into the stranger's car. This was a bad idea. She didn't know though, because as far as she knew, Conway was a pretty quiet and safe place. But instead of taking her home, he drove to a parking lot by himself. Abby knew something was very wrong. When she tried to let the driver drop her off right there, he got armed and took Abby down completely. If you haven't already guessed, this man was Nate Kibbe. He went out into the world looking for someone to scare. Anyway, Nate tied Abby's hands together, put a blindfold over her eyes, and made her crouch in the passenger seat leg space so no one could see her. The car finally came to a stop after what seemed like a very long time. Abby was taken out of the car and put down on something soft. The mattress was dirty, and Abby looked around as soon as she took off her blindfold. The room was small, the floors were metal, and the door had latches. The small room's walls were also padded to block out noise, and this time, Abby saw the person who had taken her wearing a gold Halloween mask. Nate told Abby that bad things would happen if she ever tried to leave or make a noise. I have no idea how Abby must have been feeling. This is so much worse than what the words scared and terrified can describe. Sadly, Abby was tortured and over again almost right away. It was disgusting and cruel to be around Nate. Nate kept her chained for days on end even though she was already locked up in this huge storage container. Even worse, Nate would torment Abby for his own twisted amusement, using everything from a stun gun to a dog's shock collar. On top of that, Abby was repeatedly exploited in other terrible ways. At first, all she could do was endure and hope she'd survive. One thing she was certain of, though, was her desire to live and find her way back home despite being trapped in such a horrific situation. Nate tried to break her spirit by telling her that no one was really looking for her, even while the police and Abby's family held press conferences pleading for her safe return. This cruel tactic was designed to make Abby feel helpless and isolated. She knew her loved ones were out there, just miles away, desperately searching for her. But Nate wanted her to believe they wouldn't get to her in time. Abby even saw her mother break down in tears on camera. Despite the fear Nate tried to instill, those moments also fueled Abby's determination to survive. His cruelty, ironically, gave her a reason to keep fighting. Purpose to stay alive, purpose to keep going, and purpose to maybe get away. After being held captive for 2 weeks, Nate told Abby to write a letter to her mom. Xenia got the same letter on November 6th. Nate thought that this was his plan to keep the police from looking into it. This proves that Abby did write the letter, and she even used her nails to carve the words help and kidnap into the paper. Nate, on the other hand, was smarter and found out about it. He scared Abby about what he would do to her, but all he did was make her write another letter, which he then looked over and sent. That didn't stop though. 6 months into her jail time though, Abby realized something. Nate was under her control. She was good at controlling him. She felt like she had to give it a try after hearing this. And just like two friends would, Abby and Nate talked about normal things, and Nate quickly formed a strange bond with her, which Abby saw coming. Nate would say that Abby was almost like a daughter to him, which is a whole new level of what the heck. Nate would also sit down with Abby and talk about his life and the Constitution. Besides taking off her blindfold, he gave Abby books to read. This way, Abby was sure she knew what Nate looked like. Nate gave Abby a cookbook that said Nate Kibbe on it. He also gave her a book. It had been 6 months since Abby had seen Nate, so this was the first time she knew his name. Ayn Rand is an American author who was born in Russia and is best known for creating the philosophical system objectivism. Abby learned that Nate was a big fan of she. Nate liked the Gadsden flag and libertarianism as well. He would talk to Abby for hours about these topics as if he were a teacher, and Nate also made fake money. This was how he got back at the government, which he hated so much. Abby even helped him out at one point to get his trust and make herself look as mild as possible. Finally, Abby's abuse got worse, but it didn't stop completely. He began to see people working on the street, and guess what? He gave them fake money. This means that Nate not only hired adult workers, but also lied to them, which is again so unbelievable. Well, this would bite him back, and in the end, it would be Abby's way out of jail. Before he talked to the police about the guns and the questions about the shipping container, Nate made Abby write one more letter. The detectives were very close to Abby at the time, but they couldn't do anything. Nate was even more scared after this, so he went up to Abby and told her she knew too much. He also tried to move Abby, but she wasn't aware of where she was being taken because she was blindfolded. But Nate was just joking when he put her in his car, drove around in circles, and put her back in the same shipping container. But do you remember that Nate was seeing adult workers at the time? One of them was a woman named Lauren Monday, who was 27 years old. It was clear that Nate had lied to her by giving her fake money. The next day, Lauren found out the money wasn't real when she went to the store to buy something. Lauren was so mad at Nate that she called him and yelled at him, even threatening to call the police. Nate was smart because he didn't tell Lauren his real name. But he wasn't the smartest because his full name was on the email he sent to Lauren. And Lauren was also able to tell the police about Nate's car. Nate walked into the bunker or container where Abby was after the call with Lauren. He was mad and scared at the same time. She knew better than anyone else not to poke the bear though. She kept her cool and asked him what was wrong. Nate then went on a rant, and Abby heard the whole thing. She was sick of Nate's abuse and didn't want to be the target of it, so she listened to him rant even though she didn't want to. That was a good thing because what happened next surprised even Abby. Nate approached Abby, placed her clothes in a plastic bag and told her, "I need you to leave here." Abby feared he was planning to take her somewhere else, but that wasn't the case. As Nate drove for what felt like hours, Abby was terrified. Normally, she could anticipate his actions, but this time was different. A flicker of hope hit her when she looked out the window and recognized the surroundings. It was the very place where Nate had first kidnapped her. When he stopped the car and told Abby to get out, she did so immediately without hesitation. She slammed the door behind her and watched as Nate drove away. Abby was overwhelmed, relieved to be free, yet terrified that Nate might come back at any moment and drag her back to that awful bunker. As she walked the short distance to her house, Abby wore the same clothes she did 9 months ago. When she got there, she opened the door and called for her mom. Jenya was so sad in the living room that she couldn't hear Abby's voice. Really, Jenya thought she was seeing things. But when she saw Abby with her own eyes, she was taken back to October night when all she wanted was for Abby to walk through the front door. You couldn't even begin to imagine how emotional these two were. This was all Jinja ever wanted and all she could think about, getting her daughter back home. Now her daughter just walked back into her life, safe and sound, with no hints or build-up at all. That's because Abby was still alone with Nate when she got home, so it wasn't easy for her to talk. Before he let Abby go, Nate told her that he would go after her and her family if she ever called the police. He said she wouldn't like what would happen. She was so scared that she would do anything to keep her family safe, even lie about the person who took her. People had a lot of different thoughts about Abby and her disappearance because of this. A lot of people said Abby was lying and that she had just run away. They thought the whole kidnapping story was just a cover for something else. Everyone was not sure if Abby's disappearance was real or not. Abby and her family went through a terrible event. People in Xenia's community who had been there for her during this whole ordeal were now turning against her and her daughter. With the police's help, Abby finally got the courage to tell them who took her, and Nathaniel Kibbe was arrested in February 2014. The state built a case against Nate over the course of almost 3 years. He was charged with making fake money, assault, and kidnapping Abby Hernandez, among other things. Nate was found guilty in the end and given a prison sentence of 45 to 90 years. At his sentencing, a very familiar person showed up. "Hey, Abby Hernandez." What she said on May 16, 2016 was so moving and strong. All of us could learn from how brave she is. That day, Abby walked into court, looked Nate in the eyes and told him she was sorry for everything he had done to her. Abby stopped taking every moment of her life for granted after she met Nate. Even though she was kidnapped, the experience changed her outlook on life. She promised herself that she would never take another sunset, second, or happy moment in her life for granted. She also shared that after her kidnapping, she cherishes her freedom more than ever. Today, Abby works as a hairstylist and takes immense pride in her child, whom she loves deeply. She leads a quiet, private life now, and we can only hope she's healing from the trauma that forever altered her world. Abby's fight didn't end when she escaped. She continues to persevere, not just for herself but for her family as well. It's hard to even fathom what Abigail endured. Her story isn't something you could invent, but her courage and resilience in the face of darkness teach us all an important lesson. No matter how tough things get or how bleak the situation, we should never give up. Moving on to the next case. The case of Stephen Avery. Guilty until proven innocent? Stephen Avery's story has captured the attention of millions, with many divided over his guilty conviction. Was an innocent man framed, Or did prison break him and make him a murderer? The subject of the compelling true crime documentary, Making a Murderer, created a stir internationally. The documentary follows the case of Stephen Avery, a man freed after a wrongful conviction, only to be charged with murder 2 years later. For the Halbach family, a reminder that nightmares can filter into reality. For Teresa Halbach, October 31, 2005, was another day at the office. As a freelance photographer working for Auto Trader magazine at the time, she received a call to shoot a few photos of the Avery's auto salvage. She was never seen again. First reported as a missing person on November 3, 2005, a large-scale search began for Teresa. On the afternoon of November 5, 2005, her Toyota RAV4 SUV was found partially concealed in Avery's salvage yard. Investigators later discovered blood in the vehicle. Charred bone fragments and teeth were also found in a burn pit on the same property. Her car keys were in the room of the property owner, Stephen Avery. Born on March 22, 1980, Teresa was one of 5 siblings. Her parents, Richard and Karen, raised her on the family dairy farm. When she was 8 years old, her father sadly passed away. Karen eventually remarried Richard's brother Thomas, and together they raised their blended family. Teresa was an outdoorsy girl who aspired to work for National Geographic as a photojournalist. Friends described her as having an uncanny ability to make everyone feel welcomed. She was dedicated to her studies, making summa cum laude with a degree in photography. After graduating from the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, Teresa continued to work with Pierce Photography, whom she interned with during her college days. She started her own business, Photography by Teresa, and operated out of the Pierce studio. She traveled extensively, and to supplement her income, she took on freelance jobs for Auto Trader magazine, taking pictures of vehicles that were put up for sale. It was this job that led to her untimely death. All the evidence found pointed to one person, Stephen Avery. Avery had contacted Teresa to set up an appointment to take pictures of his sister's minivan. According to records, she was last seen at 2:30 p.m. that afternoon. This was later confirmed by Stephen's nephew, Bobby, who told police he saw the car enter the salvage yard. Avery was initially charged with a weapons violation as a convicted felon. On November 11, 2005, he was formally charged with the murder of Teresa, kidnapping, sexual assault, and mutilation of a corpse. The blood found in the SUV proved a positive match for Avery's. A set of car keys belonging to Teresa found in Avery's room. All the while, Avery maintained his innocence, alleging the police were trying to frame him. He was in the middle of a civil lawsuit with Manitowoc County for $36 million. Stephen Avery, born July 9, 1962, is a Manitowoc County native, raised in Wisconsin alongside his 2 brothers, Charles and Earl, and sister Barbara by parents Dolores and Alan. He dropped out of high school, with reports suggesting he had an IQ of 70. Stephen was no stranger to the law. In 1981, he served 10 months in jail following the burglary of a bar. A year later, he pleaded guilty to animal cruelty after pouring gasoline on his pet cat and tossing it into a bonfire. For this, he served another 9 months. In 1985, he threatened his cousin Sharon Morris by forcing her off the road and thereafter pointing a gun at her. He later alleged that he wanted her to stop spreading rumors. She had filed a report alleging that he exposed himself on several occasions and was in the front yard. Although he received a 6-year sentence for his crime, he was granted bail and released. However, it was a case of mistaken identity that had him locked away for nearly 2 decades. Penny Bierniston reported that she had been walking along a beach near 2 Rivers when she was attacked and assaulted on July 29, 1985. Police believe the description she gave had a striking resemblance to Avery. She went on to choose his photo during an interview with police and later picked him out during a suspect lineup. He was arrested and charged with the attack on Bierniston. A state-appointed forensic official claimed that a hair found on Avery's shirt was consistent with the victim's. This evidence led to his conviction in December 1985. All this despite a staggering 16 witness testimonies and a time-stamped receipt to prove his whereabouts at the time of the assault. Stephen was convicted of rape and attempted murder and sentenced to 32 years in prison. Avery maintained his innocence and appealed in both 1987 and 1996. Both appeals were denied by the higher court. In February 2001, though, Stephen made contact with the Wisconsin Innocence Project. The organization took on the case, and in February 2002, Stephen was exonerated after DNA evidence proved he was innocent. It was later learned that another man, Gregory Allen, committed the crime and did, in fact, confess to it in 1995. Deputies alleged that Sheriff Deputy Thomas Kokerick received a call and said, "We already have the right guy. Don't concern yourself with it." Allen and Steve bore a striking resemblance. Allen also committed a similar crime in the same area that Bernstein was attacked and was under police surveillance, but he was not considered a suspect. Allen was not even called up as a suspect in the lineup. After 18 years, Stephen walked out a free man on September 11, 2003. He then went to file a civil lawsuit against former Sheriff Thomas Korkrenek and former District Attorney Dennis Vogel to the tune of $36 million. His freedom, however, wouldn't last long. When Teresa was reported missing, searches were conducted in the salvage yard. This was the place she'd last been seen, as confirmed by Stephen's nephew, Bobby Dassey. Stephen claimed that he had spoken to Teresa when she came by to take the photos, and then she left. Apart from the bone fragments, SUV, car keys, and blood found in the car, a bullet with Teresa's DNA was discovered in the garage. While incarcerated for Teresa's murder, Stephen's lawsuit was settled in February 2006, and he was paid a mere $400,000 while in jail. Stephen's younger nephew, Brenton Dassey, was also questioned in relation to the murder. Brendan, who was 16 years old at the time of the murder, was interrogated by police without parental supervision or a lawyer being present. Brendan confessed to investigators that he and Stephen first assaulted Teresa before murdering her. They then burned her body to destroy evidence.
I grabbed her arm, put her on the side, and tied her up. Caught her.
Caught her where?
On the throat.
He was charged in March 2006 as an accessory to the murder. He later recanted his statement, claiming that he'd been coerced by detectives. Brendan was charged with the same crimes as Stephen, although there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. Stephen was convicted in March 2007 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Later that same year, Brendan, too, was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 2048. But there was not to be a cut and dry solution to the murder. The convictions sparked controversy. It was a sensational case. Stephen was the first of the Innocent Project's 174 exonerated convicts to be charged with a violent crime after being released. This caught the interest of aspiring filmmakers Laura Ricciardi and Moira Demos. Making a Murderer premiered on Netflix in February 2015 and created a media maelstrom. The documentary, which took 10 years to research and produce, profiled the case of Stephen Avery. The series chronicles the case timeline beginning with Stephen's wrongful conviction in 1985 and subsequent exoneration, civil lawsuit against the Manitowoc County, and the arrest of Stephen and Brendan in regard to the murder of Teresa Halbach. It received both praise and criticism from critics and those directly involved with Teresa's case. The stir it caused on an international level has driven to division in public opinion. A petition to have Stephen and Brendan pardoned was drawn up and sent to the White House. It garnered over 128,000 signatures but still failed to make any impact. The White House stated, as the convictions were made in a state court, the president had no authority to pardon either defendant. There are those who firmly support the innocence of Stephen and Brendan. These include his immediate family, who have supported him and also pray for the real killer of Teresa to be found. Sandy Greenman, Stephen's ex-fiancée, is one such person. Greenman has been his avid supporter, going as far as to start a Facebook page to garner support and give exposure to the case. She described him as a model inmate. Greenman stated that people take a perverse pleasure in tainting Stephen's name. People like to say Stephen Avery has been violent all his life, which is not true, she said. Most notably, though, was the support offered by Kim Kardashian. The socialite has been using her influence to advocate for a fair justice system. Having come across the case on a social media site, her interest was piqued. Although she has made appeals to the governor, even her level of influence has no sway. However, she hasn't given up and hopes to seek justice for both Stephen and Brendan. The other half feels Stephen is where he belongs. On that side of the coin is Jody Stokowski, another ex-fiancée. Jody initially pledged her support in Stephen's innocence during the documentary. Afterwards, she alleged that she had lied and it was all an act. Jody went on to explain to Nancy Grace in an interview that he threatened to kill her and her family. He alleged that he wanted revenge on all women after his life was wrongfully stolen from him. Stephen is the one person I can't trust. He's a monster, she said. The show also ignited a debate regarding the perspective covered by the documentary. For the supporters of Stephen and Brandon, they feel the points most significant to the trial were highlighted. Dean Strang, one of Stephen's attorneys, agreed that the documentary covered enough to give the public a chance to judge for themselves. He disagreed that the series was subjective. As for the relatives of Teresa, they say the show saddened them. The Hallbacks stated the show sought to entertain and seek profit from their loss. Teresa's aunt, Kay Jordana, and cousin-in-law, Jeremy Fournier, both stated that the show was one-sided. Former Calumet County District Attorney Ken Krantz alleges he was not given a chance to tell his side of the story. The filmmakers denied this and claimed that he refused to give an interview. In an interview with People magazine, Krantz alleges the documentary has left out key pieces of evidence. These include Stephen using a fake name when calling Teresa, DNA belonging to Stephen was found on the SUV's hood latch, and a ballistics report showed that the bullet found in the garage was fired from a rifle owned by Stephen. Krantz further alleges that prior to her murder, Teresa had once before made a trip to the Avery residence. When Stephen answered the door with only a towel on, she said she wouldn't go back because she was scared of him. In response to criticism from Krantz and other officials, the filmmakers said they had given prosecutors the opportunity to answer questions. They believed that the documentary was a fair representation of the case and covered the most consequential evidence given during the trial. The documentary had its desired effect. It poked holes into the narrative of Stephen and Brendan's case by exposing allegations of police and prosecutorial misconduct, evidence tampering, and witness coercion. At the outset, Stephen called out the police for trying to frame him. This to avoid the county paying out the $36 million lawsuit he filed. Stephen believed his lawsuit would be undermined if he was convicted of another violent crime. To avoid a conflict of interest, Manitowoc County gave neighboring Calumet County authority over the handling of the case. Part of the deal, however, was that Calumet could use resources which included personnel from Manitowoc. The key in Stephen's room was found by Manitowoc Sheriff's deputy after several searches of the property. Another allegation made was regarding the blood evidence found in the car. Stephen and his defense team believe it was blood used from his prior conviction. Giving credence to this scenario were the claims made by the defense. According to the Avery defense team, the vial containing Stephen's blood had been tampered with and a puncture hole was visible on the stopper. The prosecution, however, combated this claim by testing the blood for a preservative not found in fresh human blood and found none. Avery's defense team brought in an expert witness who stated it was not possible to tell if the negative result meant there was none of the preservative present or the technology to test itself was inconclusive. The documentary shone a spotlight on the manner of interrogation with regard to Brandon Dassey. Dassey was just 16 years old during the interrogation. Firstly, he was interviewed without the supervision of a lawyer or parent. It's understood that both he and his mother consented to the interrogation. But what piqued the interest of many was that Brandon had an IQ of 73, classifying him as intellectually challenged. Many have argued that his intellectual disability left him open to suggestion, particularly when it was shown that the Reed technique of interrogation was used. The Reed technique has been criticized for producing high rates of false confessions, especially from juveniles and the mentally impaired. The technique is used to make the suspect comfortable and eventually confess to crimes through familiarity with the interrogators. The interrogator then proceeds to tell the suspect that the evidence shows that the suspect did commit the crime. Dassey allegedly agrees with the interrogators during the interviews, but later recanted his confession. He accused his first defense team of collaborating with the prosecution to get him to confess. He's also claimed that coercion was used to elicit a confession from him. Both Stephen and Brendan have appealed their convictions, but have been denied innumerable times and remain in prison. The defense teams of both men have exhausted their efforts in trying to get retrials on both men's charges. Following the Making a Murderer documentary and the public outcry regarding Stephen and Brendan's innocence, significant new developments have occurred in both their legal teams. Professors Laura Nyrider and Stephen Dreisen of the Northwestern University Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth are representing Brendan. They too began with numerous appeals and have come up against many hurdles, but have refused to give up just yet. Meanwhile, Stephen's appointment of Kathleen Zellner has shaken up the case and given further hits to the prosecution's claims. His previous lawyers, Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, have taken their newfound fame and gone on tour to promote and bring attention to the case of Stephen Avery. Zellner, considered a trailblazing trial lawyer, has been responsible for overturning 19 wrongful convictions. Her dogged determination and careful analysis of cases has seen her uncover missing evidence that helped exonerate her clients. Most recently notable, she was a consultant for Johnny Depp and his defense team during his trial. Zellner hit the ground running when she was appointed to Stephen's defense team and firmly believes her client is innocent. One of the first things she put to rest was the alleged confession of Joseph Evans Jr. Evans alleged he was responsible for killing Teresa and trying to frame Stephen. Zellner stated that it was a not-so-subtle attempt at publicity. Previously, Evans played Smitch and allegedly wrote a 9-page letter to media outlets claiming he heard Stephen confess to the murder. This time, though, it seems he wanted in on a portion of reward money to make his life in prison more comfortable. However, his claim is not gaining the traction he expected. In August 2016, Zellner filed a motion demanding new scientific testing be done. Willing to pay for the extensive testing, Zellner intended to use this evidence to prove that Stephen had been framed. The theory was that 3 different burn pits showed evidence of human remains being burned. A particularly significant find was that of a human pelvic bone fragment, a bone that was given to the Hull box as part of Teresa's remains. This action, claimed Zellner, was proof that Teresa's remains were planted in Stephen's burn pit. The defense, however, didn't get the opportunity to test these bones as they were not disclosed to them. This was a Brady violation according to Zellner, meaning that evidence which could have helped exonerate Stephen was not disclosed in the proper manner with regards to the criminal case. Crucial evidence was just out of their reach. Zellner remained relentless in her pursuit for justice. She approached the case with a new angle, one that could potentially point to a new suspect in the case. Being unable to test the bone fragments, Zellner opted for forensic testing of the Daisy family computer. What she found on it was damning. Pornographic images of women in various stages of torture, violent images and videos depicting women as victims. All these images were allegedly accessed at times when Bobby Dassey was at home. Furthermore, Zellner pointed out that Barbara, Bobby, and Brendan's mother, along with Stephen's sister and her husband, Stott Todick, were trying to get rid of evidence that could implicate Bobby. The forensic team were able to download 2,449 pages of data from the computer to a CD-ROM to present as part of the motion for a retrial. On it were all the searches, videos, and photos accessed by Bobby. Bobby is the older brother of Brendan and the nephew of Stephen. He was also the key eyewitness for the prosecution at Stephen's trial. He alleged that he last saw Teresa going to his uncle's house, and when he returned from hunting that afternoon, did not see her or the car again. Added to these claims are the allegations of his half-brother, Brad Dacey. Brad is alleged to have said he believes his uncle is innocent. He also made claims that his stepmother, Barb, and Stephen's brother-in-law, Scott, wiped the computer, deleting all pornographic material. Allegedly, Barb has filed a harassment suit against Brad following a conversation they had about tracing deleted files from a computer, which some believe is, in part, to ensure Brad remains silent about his knowledge. For Bobby, though, the final nail in his coffin could be the evidence that exonerates Stephen and, in turn, Brendan. An eyewitness has come forward claiming to have seen Bobby being assisted by a much older man, pushing Teresa's SUV back into the salvage yard. Thomas Sawinski stated in a sworn affidavit that he drove by Bobby and the other man while en route to deliver newspapers. When he passed the duo a second time, Bobby allegedly stepped out in front of his car to stop him. Thomas swerved to avoid him and continued on his morning route. He said that Bobby's eyes showed he was not pleased to see him there. Following the discovery of the SUV, Thomas realized the significance of the find and contacted police. He told them everything he'd seen that morning, and their response was, "We already know who did it." He provided his details, but he never heard back from them. For Zellner, this provides a contradiction to the prosecution's key witness. If proven true, which she is confident about, Bobby's testimony would be false. Zellner believes the rejection of all the crucial evidence in favor of Stephen denied him a fair chance to prove his innocence years ago. The newly filed motion is still with the appeals court and is awaiting an opinion or decision to be read over in November 2022. Stephen Avery continues to maintain his innocence. Kathleen Zellner, in her own words, says she represents the wrongfully convicted and added, "If you lie to her, she will find you out."